conversation. All right, today, as the bye is over, we're kind of that over the hump day of the week, and we're looking forward now to Monday night, and we'll get to a lot on the Eagles-Chiefs game tomorrow and on Monday before the game. But I was thinking about just the NFL as a whole. And, yesterday on Birds of the Bye, on the midday show, we were discussing, are the Eagles truly a great team? And I don't think they are. I think they're a very good team. I'm not sure if there is a truly great team in the NFL this year, but obviously the Eagles are a true contender to win the Super Bowl. They have the best record in the league. If they hold serve to a decent extent down the stretch, they will likely be the number one seed and win the division, putting them in great position to get back to a Super Bowl again and win it. But how many teams actually could do this, can actually win the Super Bowl? Before the season, we did an exercise like this on the show, and I forget how many I had, like 11 or whatever it was. And I've pared that number down. Obviously, things change across the league, this far into the season. Quarterback injuries have been a major factor. I mean, the Jets were a team before the season that you could make a case for. I did. And then the quarterback situation went from whatever was going to be, even if you thought Aaron Rodgers would be just a little above average at this point of his career, to awful with Zach Wilson. The Jets are not a Super Bowl contender. And then yesterday, we find out that Deshaun Watson, who's not a very good quarterback at this point, but he's certainly a, starting level quarterback. I don't know, the 20th best quarterback in pro football. He's out, and he will not come back this season. It's a shoulder surgery. So the Browns, who have an enormous defense and look like a team that could beat anyone with that defense on a certain day, they're in big trouble to even make the playoffs now because they have to go to their backup quarterback situation, which just isn't good enough to go win in the AFC playoffs. So you take them out of the mix. So how many teams can actually win the Super Bowl? So I have 7. I'll call it the Super 7. We'll get Tucker's thoughts and really who he has in his Super Bowl bubble, the Super 7. I have 7. We'll see how many Tucker has. But so when I did this, I now that we have evidence, right? This isn't just projection before the season, which that's what you're doing in the preseason. You're projecting based on roster, schedule, our perception, the betting market, win total numbers, all that. Like now we have real evidence of what these teams are through 9 or 10 games, whatever they've played. And I think 7 teams have shown enough evidence that they are Super Bowl worthy, that I will not be surprised at all if one of these 7 teams, in fact, I'm going to be surprised if one of these 7 teams doesn't win the Super Bowl. Like, could someone surprise and make a run that's not in my Super 7? Yeah, I mean, they could, but I think they'll be beat by someone who is in my Super 7 on, Super Bowl Sunday. So even if someone comes out of nowhere to get there, I just think one of these teams is going to raise the Lombardi this year. Let's start off with the Eagles. And the Eagles actually have one of the best, they have the best record. And then they have maybe some of the worst profile in terms of things about them. So as I get into the teams, a couple of things I like to look at. Point differential, I think, is a significant factor. And, you could look at some underlying numbers or advanced metrics, who's top 10 in this, top 10 in that, yards allowed, points allowed, all those kind of things. Yards per play, I think, is a good number. DVOA kind of encompasses everything. It's almost like a football team thing that would be like war in baseball. It encompasses everything. And these teams are all primarily within the top 10 of let's say, point differential and DVOA, and like they're really highly thought of. One other thing, and I'll get to this when I knock a couple teams out and I question a couple teams and I tell you why I didn't put a couple teams in. If you look at net yards per play, I think it's a really interesting statistic because it tells a picture over time of, are you dominating? Are you squeaking by? Should you be better than you are? Are you worse than you should be? All those kind of things. Teams that dominate week in, week out in terms of yardage are usually good. I mean, you could have flukiness where you outgain a team by 200 and lose, but that's rare. And you could have flukiness where you get outgained by 150 and win, like it seems like the Steelers do like every other week, but that's rare. So week by week, I think that matters. And these teams, for the most part, excel in that. So let's go through the 7 teams. Number 1, and this isn't in any particular order, it's just 7 teams I think will win. One of them will win the Super Bowl, are the Philadelphia Eagles. Here's what they have going for them. 8 wins in the bank. They have 3 at the back end of their schedule that are as big of gimmies as you're going to find in the NFL right now, with the Giants, the Cardinals at home, and then the Giants again. I mean, they will win all 3 of those games. So just write them down. They have 11 wins right now before they play the next 5 games. Like, just think of it as they're 11-1. That's the way I look at it, with 5 games to go. Now, will they finish with 14 wins, 15, 16, 13, 11? I don't know. I mean, we're going to find out. 12? I mean, the Eagles have built such a cushion here that they are going to have an enormous chance to do something in January because they're going to be in January. I think there's higher upside to their defense than they've shown so far, but it hasn't been good. And they actually have one of the worst statistical profiles in terms of net yards per play, DVOA. They're closer to 10 to 15 in the league rather than they are number one. Last year, they profiled just way better as a Super Bowl contender, but obviously they are one. Tremendous quarterback, pass rush, offensive line. They have the elements that when they get in, if they're healthy in January, they'll be very hard to beat. And here's what we know, unlike some of these teams, they're going to be there and very likely a high seed. All right, we'll go through kind of the NFC and then we'll get to the AFC, just doing that order. No, I'll go my second one here are the 49ers. I think they have the best knockout punch in the NFL. Like when they're on their A game is better than anybody's A game. I put it a little bit over Dallas because they knocked Dallas out, and they also did to Jacksonville. Dallas seemingly brings their A game more against bad teams. The Niners could bring it against anybody. Now, they have lost 3 games, which is obviously bad for them as they try to get close to a number 1 seed. But they will likely win a bunch the rest of the way. I don't fear Seattle as a team that's going to actually take the division from them. They're number 3 in net yards per play. They're number 2 in DVOA. Purdy is a good quarterback. As much people want to distract from that, he's good. He executes that offense at a high level. Their coach is really good. Their defensive personnel is really good. The Niners obviously are good enough to win the Super Bowl. Number 3, the Dallas Cowboys. They have a knockout punch that is very good. Dak Prescott's playing really high-level football right now. I mean, that's the reality of it. And as much as McCarthy gets banged, I mean, he wins a lot of football games. And they'll probably get to 12 wins without much question. They're going to reel off a lot of wins coming up here. Now, with them and the Eagles, the question is going to be the 1 seed versus the 5 seed. And that's a big deal. And right now, Dallas is trending more towards a 5 seed. So the path is harder. But if Dallas finds themselves, like if they could get over the hump, they can obviously win it. It's just a matter of them getting over that hump. Number 4, the Detroit Lions. They in almost everything, they are top of the class. They can run the football. They can throw the football. Their defensive underlying numbers are better than you think, especially after watching them against the Chargers last week. You would think, it's a bottom 10 defense. They're ranked as a top 10 defense at DVOA. Net yards per play is good. Like, they're really good. The one thing that they don't have going for them right now is point differential. And I think that's skewed a little bit here by one bad day they had against the Baltimore Ravens. Point differential over 17 games, over 16, I think does tell a good picture, paint a good picture. After 9 or 10, if you had one bad Sunday, it's going to skew that. So their point differential is like plus 38. If we get to the end of the season and their point differential is still trending in this direction, which means they've kind of squeaked by the Packers and the Bears and these teams and the Broncos left on their schedule, I will then say maybe they're not in the class that I think I'm putting them right now. My guess is they're going to blow some of these teams out. And it'll be more like last year's Eagles, who first 8 or 9, it was like really good, but who'd they beat? And it's not that impressive. And then they started blowing the doors off teams. I think we're going to trend that way with Detroit. They're in. They check a lot of boxes. And in terms of their path is set up for them that they could have home field advantage. Only have to get 2 home wins against really good opponents, obviously, like in the NFC with the Eagles, Cowboys, and Niners. But 2 home wins could put them in a Super Bowl. The Lions can win this thing. All right, my 3 in the AFC. Kansas City, it is a different Kansas City team. They're not as dynamic as they've been in the past. I don't think Mahomes has MVP numbers, but he's the favorite again for the award. Kelsey, I feel, has taken a little bit of a step back, and maybe he's distracted, maybe he's just aging. I don't know what it is, but I don't think he's the same player right now he's been in years past. The receivers are pedestrian. I do like Pacheco, but their defense is what's changed things. I mean, their defense is really good. McDuffie and Karlaftis drafted last year are really good. The kid they signed from the Niners had all those off-the-field problems. He could play. I mean, he was a problem last year when he played in San Francisco. Obviously, Chris Jones is a difference maker. They have a really good secondary. They don't need to score 35 to win anymore because of how good their defense is. The Chiefs are going to be the number 1 seed. They're probably going to get to the Super Bowl again. I mean, this is one of the weaker AFCs. I mean, I only have 2 more AFC teams on my list, as the Chiefs are the 5th team we're bringing up here. So it just goes to show you, I don't think there's many great teams in the AFC, and teams that we thought were contenders are falling by the wayside left and right. So the Chiefs, almost by default, are going to be hosting another AFC title game. My 6th team on my Super Bowl Super 7 are the Baltimore Ravens. They've had a really odd season because statistically you look at them and they're blowing the doors off of everyone. They have the best profile at anyone, DVOA and net yards and points. It's like, wow. They've only trailed this season for a very small amount of time, like total, and yet have 3 losses on their ledger. It's, the game in Pittsburgh they blew, the Colts game they blew, last week they blew. And that might be what this team is. I don't love Lamar as a closer in the fourth quarter. He's obviously having a good year. I said last week he's probably MVP of the league at that point, and he's a good quarterback. There's something about him as a closer in a fourth quarter. I thought last year, all year he did it. I mean, I remember games where he'd throw picks in the fourth quarter, fumbling. And it's like, you can't just look at the big picture. What is he doing wrong in those moments? Yet they are really good, and they have a really good coach. They have a chance to win the Super Bowl. The Ravens are in. And my last team, and this might be an unpopular one, Tucker might disagree on this, but I have the Dolphins in. I'm not done with them as a team that could get better. I think their defense will get better as the year goes on. I actually walked away from their loss to Kansas City impressed. They held Kansas City. I know it's not a classic Kansas City offense to 14 points. Their defense is improving with Vic Fangio. They got Jalen Ramsey back. Their net yards per play is off the charts. I mean, they are just rolling through teams. And I look at their schedule, and with Buffalo struggling, I think they're going to win their division. They'll get at least one home playoff game, maybe two. We'll see what happens the rest of the season. I put them in. I think they're very dynamic in a lot of ways. They could run it. They could throw it. Their defense is getting better. And their coach is really smart. So I put them in. Quickly, before we get to Tucker, 3 teams that I'm taking out. I took out just officially this week. Cleveland, see ya, because of the quarterback situation. Buffalo, dead team walking, even though they have some statistical markers tell you they're going to bounce back. I'm out. And Cincinnati, everyone got excited when they won a few games in a row. They don't look like a Super Bowl team. Their defense has not been as good this year, and their offense is spotty. And Burrow's been back, but he was banged up early. Now he has this weird thing. Maybe a wrist is bothering him. I think Cincinnati can miss the playoffs as well. One more to throw in that I thought about. I didn't put him in. I almost had 8. I didn't put him in. But I think the Texans are more than a cute story. I think they're a good football team. They look like a top 11, 12, 10 football team in the NFL right now. Maybe it's just too soon with a rookie coach and a rookie quarterback, but I wouldn't want to play them if they get in the playoffs. I mean, if they win their division, which I think they're going to now, and whoever the 5 seed is going to be in the AFC, whoever, it's going to be Pittsburgh or maybe Cleveland sneaks in, or I don't know, maybe Buffalo sneaks in, whoever it's going to be. I think they could beat any of them and win a playoff game there. I really like this Houston team, probably a year away, but I wouldn't be shocked if they're in the Final Four in the AFC. Tucker, I have 7 teams, I believe, right now can win the Super Bowl. Eagles, Niners, Cowboys, Lions, Chiefs, Dolphins, Ravens. The Super 7, as I call them. Who do you got?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you kept the Texans on the outside, because Super 8 just wouldn't have made sense, right? It would have felt like a weird brand partnership with a motel. So I'm glad we kept it with Super 7. That makes sense. And I agree with you. I don't really believe in any of the AFC North teams. Cleveland made a disastrous mistake by going with Dorian Thompson-Robinson this week. I'm not sure why you would go with him over PJ Walker, who's 4-1, by the way, when he plays for the Cleveland Browns this year. So
he's a winner. He wins.
He's a winner. I mean, flat out. Never forget, he was undefeated as a professional quarterback for the first 6 years of his career. So the fact that they've decided to go with that just proves they're a losing organization. And in the NFC, I mean, I think there's a real clear line of demarcation between the top 4 teams and everybody else. And I thought coming into the year, a lot of people thought the AFC as a whole is so much stronger. You really just have to look at the quarterbacks, right, to kind of think that. And I think at this point it might be deeper, right, when you have teams like Buffalo, like Cincinnati kind of on the outside of the playoff picture right now. But I look at the top of each conference, and the teams at, the top 3 or 4 seeds. The Cowboys currently, I think, are the 6th seed, because they're losing out on a tiebreaker to Seattle, who's the 5 seed in the NFC. And it's so much better than the AFC. In the AFC, I think the Chiefs could win. I know you don't believe in the Bengals. I think they have a shot with Joe Burrow. And, if they can kind of figure things out, hopefully T. Higgins gets back, although he's not going to play tonight. That can certainly aid their offense a little bit. But, I don't believe in Baltimore that much. I don't believe in any of the teams in the AFC North. I think, most of the teams outside of Kansas City, the AFC West is an absolute dumpster fire. And even the AFC South, Jacksonville only has 3 losses, but we know what we think of their quarterback, and I don't think he's a winner. So I think the NFC is far more intriguing. And right now it's a tougher schedule, because if you look at who's going to be playing, divisional weekend, I think there's a chance set up where we have 4 teams who could win the Super Bowl playing on the NFC side, and maybe 2 on the AFC side. Everyone who started the season saying and laughing at the Chiefs for losing to Detroit week 1, and it's finally the end of the Patrick Mahomes era, and they're going to take a step backwards. Not happening, unfortunately. Like, they're still at the top of the AFC. They're still going to win the division. They're probably going to host all the playoff games again. Patrick Mahomes will go like 5th or 6th straight year without having to play a road playoff game because it's just what they do.
But they do. I mean, it's incredible. It is incredible that Mahomes has never played a road playoff game. I don't think that's going to change this year. They clearly have the path to the Super Bowl. They do. And right now, they have a great chance to be there again against one of those 4 teams in the NFC. I have 7 teams that can win the Super Bowl. Eagles among them. Appreciate everyone listening, subscribing, following WIP Daily. We'll talk tomorrow. A lot of Eagles Chiefs on tap coming up next couple days right here in the feed. Thanks so much for listening.